Indonesia looks like a country someone invented in a fever dream. 17,000 islands scattered like shattered glass across the sea, stitched together by storms, currents, and sheer stubbornness. From above, it's paradise. From below, it's a battlefield where tectonic plates grind their teeth and refuse to be quiet. And yet here it is, alive, where it shouldn't be. A nation sitting on a violent collision zone, balanced on fault lines like a tightrope walker, while volcanoes breathe in the background like sleeping animals that never fully fall asleep. This is the core contradiction. The places that feel most heavenly are often built on the most ruthless foundations. Indonesia is beauty with sharp edges, beaches born from pulverized rock, jungles fed by ash, coral gardens blooming where mountains drowned. So when someone calls it a tropical escape, the land almost laughs. Because every palm tree, every rice terrace, every fishing boat drifting at dawn is living proof that catastrophe doesn't just destroy, it can also create, layer by layer, century by century. And the question starts to itch. If this paradise was carved out of chaos, what else is hiding under the surface? What ancient collapses, eruptions, and impossible geological accidents had to happen first, before these islands could even exist? Imagine standing on a beach in Indonesia and realizing the ground under your feet might be the leftover high points of something far bigger, an ancient landmass swallowed by rising seas. What looks like a scattered island nation becomes, at that moment, a ghost map. Peaks of drowned mountains, ridgelines turned into coastlines, fragments of a world that sank. The ocean here doesn't just surround the land, it defines it, like a sculptor that never stops working. Sea levels rose, coastlines retreated, and what remained above water became stepping stones of stone, each island a surviving shard of a collapsed geography. But the drowning wasn't the end of the story, because below the surface, Indonesia sits on the ring of fire, a glowing necklace of tectonic pressure that keeps shaping the country in real time. This is where Earth's crust cracks open and speaks in flame. More than 100 active volcanoes, each one a reminder that the land is still under construction. Some eruptions don't just change islands, they change history. Tambora's blast was so massive it messed with global climate, dimming skies far beyond Indonesia. While Toba isn't just a volcano in a lake, it's a scar from something so enormous it's tied, in some theories, to a near-extinction level human bottleneck. And even when the volcanoes aren't exploding, the ground is still strange. Mud volcanoes bubble like the planet is boiling from underneath, geothermal vents hiss like warning whispers, and the landscape feels less like solid Earth and more like a living system. Out in Wakatobi, the sea doesn't just meet the land, it builds it. Coral rises like a crown on submerged mountains, turning invisible rock into living architecture, until the ocean itself becomes a city of color, movement, and breath. And drifting through it are sea nomads who read tides the way others read street signs. Current, wind, moonlight, all stitched into a kind of water language. Then, Flores flips the script again, like Indonesia is determined to never feel predictable. Here, Komodo dragons move with ancient confidence, muscle and patience, a predator that looks like it stepped out of another era. They don't need speed, they have strategy, and when they hunt, it feels less like an animal chase and more like a quiet, coordinated decision. And Flores carries stranger echoes still. the discovery of Homo floresiensis, the hobbit, a reminder that human history didn't march in a straight line. It branched, it mutated, it adapted to islands like these, where isolation can bend evolution into shapes that feel almost unreal. Even the lakes here can't sit still. Kelimutu's 3 crater lakes shift colors as if the volcano is painting with chemicals beneath the surface. One week a lake is turquoise, another week it's rust red, like the island is changing its mood in front of you without explanation. Then, Belitung arrives like a final twist. Giant granite boulders scattered along white sand, stones that are older than dinosaurs, remnants of continents torn apart and remade. And suddenly the impossibility isn't just reefs and dragons, it's the entire logic of nature here, pushing us toward the next step. If landscapes can be this extreme, what kind of human beliefs and sacred structures would grow in places where danger feels close enough to touch? In most places, people build their holiest spaces where the ground feels steady, safe, predictable, calm. Indonesia does the opposite. Here, danger isn't avoided, it's approached, honored, negotiated with. Like the land is a force you don't defeat, you live beside, and sometimes you worship. In Sulawesi's caves, ancient hands left art on stone tens of thousands of years ago, pigment pressed into darkness like a message meant to outlast breath itself. These aren't just drawings, they feel like myth made visible, proof that even early humans looked at wild landscapes and decided, this is where meaning lives. Then the mysteries deepen in places like the Bata Valley, where megaliths stand like silent witnesses with no clear explanation, as if a lost civilization stepped away mid-sentence. On Flores, stone altars still matter, not as museum pieces, but as living tradition, where rituals don't feel staged, they feel like the continuation of something unbroken. Bali turns that closeness to danger into pure theater. Tanah Lot appears to float when the tide rises, a temple placed where water and rock argue every day. Faith here isn't separated from the elements, it's built into them, timed to them, shaped by them. And then come the colossal statements, Borobudur and Prambanan, mountains of devotion carved in stone beneath a sky that has always carried volcanic threat. Even death becomes architecture in Toraja cliff tombs, where the living carve memory into rock faces, because in Indonesia, stone isn't just material, it's dialogue. So the pattern becomes clear. Sacred places aren't escapes from danger, they're ways of standing close enough to it to understand it. Which opens the next door. If belief is still alive in the landscape, what about daily life? What traditions are still running, not as reenactment, but as the normal heartbeat of the present? On coasts and in lagoons, shrimp ponds are timed not just by schedules, but by the moon, as if the sky itself is part of the workforce. Fishermen read wind and cloud shapes the way a driver reads traffic, steering canoes by intuition sharpened into something almost scientific, knowledge carried in bodies, not textbooks. In villages like Ratangaro and Sumba, homes rise with tall peaks like they're trying to catch the sky, and the layout of the place feels designed for both community and memory. Up on Flores ridges, villages cling to slopes as if the mountain is an anchor. The paths narrow, the air thin, and every step reminds you, people here didn't choose easy land. They chose land that could teach them. Then there's the kind of reinvention that still feels ancient at heart, like Jodipan, where painted color becomes pride, turning everyday streets into something brighter without erasing what came before. It's not a theme park transformation, it's a statement. We are here, and we can shape our surroundings. Even deliberate simplicity becomes a tradition in places like the Gili Islands, where life slows down by choice. No urgency, no noise, just salt air and sunlight. And underwater, statue art turns the sea into a gallery, hinting that creativity here doesn't stop at the shoreline. The ancient world never left. It just kept moving, adapting, staying useful. And that sets up the next truth. If people can keep traditions alive like this, how much of Indonesia's abundance, the rice, the food, the green, comes from the same force that threatens it? Volcanic fire turning into fertile soil. In Indonesia, the same volcanoes that scare people also feed them. Ash falls, rock breaks down, minerals spread through the soil, and what should be ruin becomes richness, like the land is turning disaster into fertilizer on a schedule only it understands. You look at a rice valley glowing green and realize you're staring at the aftermath of ancient eruptions, softened into abundance. Bali's rice terraces don't just look beautiful, they look intentional, like the hills were designed by a careful hand. Liquid jade steps cascade down slopes, catching light and water in neat layers, and when the wind runs across them, the whole landscape seems to ripple, like the island is breathing through its fields. And then there's Subak, more than irrigation, more than engineering. It's a social system where water is shared, negotiated, and choreographed through canals, temples, and community decisions, as if farming here is also a form of belonging. The water doesn't just nourish crops, it connects households, villages, and generations. You can almost hear it, the quiet clack of tools, the distant bell from a temple, the soft rush of water splitting into channels. It's not just agriculture, it's a living agreement between people and place, a reminder that survival on shifting land requires cooperation that runs deeper than convenience. Volcanic soil gives the gift, but it also keeps the debt visible, because the mountain that blesses can also take. And that leads straight into the harder edge of this story. What does it mean to live where the world can turn hostile overnight? Where hellscapes exist a short drive from paradise, where cities sink and risk becomes ordinary. At Kawa Ijen, the world looks broken on purpose. Blue flames flicker in the dark, like the earth is burning from the inside, and the air stings with sulfur so sharp it feels like it has teeth. An acid lake sits there, deceptively calm, while toxic clouds drift across the crater like a reminder that this beauty comes with a price tag. Along the coasts, other communities adapt in the opposite direction, by floating. Stilt houses and pontoons form water-bound neighborhoods, built to move with tides and storms, where the boundary between village and sea is more suggestion than line. Some coral villages are so dense they expand stone by stone, building outward as if the ocean is a crowded street they're slowly reclaiming. And then there's Jakarta, an entirely different kind of danger, slow motion but relentless. A megacity sinking, ground lowering year by year, while water pushes in like it's taking back what it was always owed. It's not a dramatic explosion, it's the quiet pressure of a future arriving early. Living on the edge isn't a metaphor here, it's a daily practice, from crater mines to floating homes to a capital slipping downward. Which raises the next question. When the worst happens, when the ocean rises as a wall, when volcanoes erupt again and again, how does Indonesia absorb catastrophe and then stand back up? Then volcanoes deliver a different kind of endurance test, one that doesn't end in a single day. Merapi's eruptions in 2010 were fierce and fast, but the deeper story is what followed across the country. A decade-long drumbeat where it wasn't one tragedy, it was a sequence. Sinabung and others waking, sleeping, then waking again, as if the land refused to settle. That changes how people grieve and rebuild. When a disaster is repeated, recovery becomes a skill, almost a culture. Evacuation routes memorized, go bags packed, shelters known by heart. People learn to rebuild in a way that expects interruption. Like resilience isn't optimism, it's planning for the next hit. And still, communities rise, homes rebuilt, markets reopened, rituals resumed, kids walking to school again under the shadow of a mountain that might smoke tomorrow. The country doesn't pretend the danger is gone. It keeps going while knowing it isn't. Which makes the next pivot even more startling. If Indonesia is this tested by catastrophe, why does the world keep coming? Why does tourism surge? Why does Bali become a global magnet? How does a place turn risk into attraction and chaos into something people chase? Here's the twist. Indonesia doesn't just survive its volatility, it sells the closeness to it, sometimes without even meaning to. Instead of the world backing away, the world leans in. Surfers, spiritual seekers, honeymooners, investors, drawn to an atmosphere that feels charged, like the air itself carries a story. Bali becomes the purest form of that alchemy. Volcanic mountains are still worshipped, offerings still placed, ceremonies still shut down roads. And yet the same island scrolls through Instagram in the background, hosting beach clubs, yoga shalas, and villas with infinity pools aimed straight at the sunset. It's not two Balis. It's one island holding contradictions in the same palm. Even the perfect parts are born from tectonic tension, waves shaped by undersea geology, cliffs cut by restless earth, waterfalls that feel like stage sets because the land is constantly carving new lines. People come for serenity, but the serenity is framed by forces that are anything but calm. Rituals don't disappear under tourism, they adapt around it. A traveler can watch a temple procession 1 hour, then order a smoothie bowl the next. And the strange thing is, both can feel real, because Bali's magic isn't purity, it's fusion. The island doesn't freeze itself in time, it metabolizes attention and turns it into economy. And still, beyond Bali's spotlight, there are places where remoteness acts like armor, where reefs stay intact because they're hard to reach, where forests still shelter the rare and the wild. Which leads to the next chapter. What happens when distance becomes protection? When places like Raja Ampat and Sumba, and the deep jungles of Sumatra and Borneo, hold on to a biodiversity that feels almost impossible in the modern world? Some corners of Indonesia feel like they've been kept in a locked room. Not hidden out of secrecy, but protected by sheer difficulty. Raja Ampat sits out there like a natural fortress of sea and islands, where the water is so clear it feels like you're looking through air, and the reefs seem to overflow with life as if the ocean forgot to ration beauty. The isolation does something powerful. It slows down the damage. Fewer roads, fewer crowds, fewer easy shortcuts for exploitation, so biodiversity holds its ground. Fish move in dense schools, coral structures rise like underwater cathedrals, and the whole ecosystem feels louder, busier, more complete, like you're witnessing what the planet looks like when it's not constantly interrupted. Then there's Sumba, dry, wind-brushed, almost stark compared to Indonesia's lush clichés. Its drought and distance preserve landscapes that feel alien. Rolling hills, empty horizons, villages that seem anchored in another tempo. In a world that smooths everything into sameness, Sumba keeps its edge simply by being hard to access and unwilling to rush. And deeper inland, Sumatra and Borneo hold the kind of green that swallows sound. These forests don't just shelter wildlife, they hide it, the way a cathedral hides echoes. Orangutans move through the canopy with slow intelligence, not flashy, not loud, just present, an ancient cousin living in a world that keeps shrinking. Rehab centers add another layer to the story. Human hands trying to undo human harm, raising orphaned orangutans, teaching them the skills of wildness again, then releasing them back into forests that may or may not still be there tomorrow. It's tenderness mixed with urgency, care with a ticking clock. Remoteness protects, but it also creates temptation, because what's hard to reach becomes a prize. And that nudges us into the next escalation. How does Indonesia market danger and difficulty itself? How do adrenaline travelers turn craters, cliffs, and unstable landscapes into a kind of modern pilgrimage, chasing the thrill of standing close to violence without being consumed by it? There's a certain kind of traveler who doesn't come to Indonesia to relax. They come to feel the planet's pulse up close. They rent motorbikes and trace roads that cling to crater rims, where a single glance sideways makes your stomach tighten, because the drop isn't dramatic, it's absolute. Jeep convoys grind into calderas before sunrise, headlights cutting through volcanic dust like a slow-moving expedition into another world. The air gets colder, the ground turns gritty, and suddenly tourism looks less like leisure and more like a ritual. people gathering in the dark to witness something primal. Paramotors rise above ridgelines, floating over landscapes that still look half-formed, as if the Earth is mid-creation. And below, hikers move in lines towards active craters, Bromo, Aegean, and others, climbing not despite the danger, but because of it, chasing that thin line where awe and fear meet. It's strange, almost poetic. The same violent forces that built this archipelago now act like magnets. Catastrophe becomes attraction, risk becomes scenery, and sunrise over an active volcano turns into a life milestone, proof you stood near something that could erase you and still walked away. And when the morning light finally hits the rim, the thesis locks into place without needing to be spoken too loudly. Indonesia didn't just endure destruction, it learned to live with it, farm it, pray beside it, and even invite the world to witness it. A paradise carved out of chaos, not in spite of the violence, but in the heart of it.